What if the version of you that you woke up with this morning is not actually you? What if the thoughts that you're thinking are not your thoughts? The reactions you have are not your reactions. And of course, the fears, the patterns, the walls you build are just a program, a survival program, one that was written for you before you were even old enough to choose. That's why I say hell is empty. You see, most people will live their entire lives inside that program. They'll call it personality. They'll call it just the way I am. But here's what the science now confirms and what the ancient wisdom reconfirms. It's wisdom that we've always known. That program is not who you are. It is who you became in order to survive. And until you understand the difference, you cannot truly live. There's a prison most people will never see. No walls, no bars, no warden. And yet it holds billions of people captive every single day of their lives. The prison is called personality. Not personality in the casual sense, the kind you talk about at dinner parties, but the kind that says, I'm an introvert or I'm a type A. I mean, something far deeper, far older, far more powerful. By the time most of us reached adulthood, we had already built a fortress, not to keep others out, but to keep ourselves safe. Because somewhere in childhood, perhaps it was a parent who raged, a classroom where you were humiliated, a home where you felt love was conditional, a world that simply felt too big, too dangerous, too much. Your nervous system made a decision. Protect yourself at all costs. And so the ego went to work. It built characters inside you. And we call these characters your ego insurgents. Best you get to know them well. If you get to know the 10 masks that we all wear, that we have to wear to survive as we grow up, then you can set yourself free. So know thy enemy. So firstly, we have the controller who micromanages life into utter exhaustion because somewhere deep inside, the controller believes if I let go, everything will collapse. Pretty much like Atlas in Greek philosophy, who thought he had to hold up the entire world. No. Then there's the judge, that internal critic who never, ever sleeps, who measures every thought, every action, and finds it wanting. Then there's the victim, who gave up on personal power so long ago they forgot what agency even feels like. Then we have the perfectionist. That's a common one. Setting impossible standards and calling the self a failure before the day has even begun. Then there's the people pleaser. We abandon our own needs, desires, and even the truth in exchange for the illusion of acceptance. The pleaser is slowly, quietly, silently keeping us safe by making us disappear, by making us lose our voice. Then there's the avoider who numbs through screens, substances, distractions, work, or anything else, just not to feel what is sitting underneath. This one is the seed of addiction. And on we can go. Do you recognize yourself? Because here's the truth. Most of us aren't living one of these characters. We're living all 10. And you need to know what they are. You know, the truth will set you free. Bring it to the light. Get the monsters out of the closet. And you will be set free from creating a paradigm shift from personality to spirituality. So instead of shifting between these 10 ego insurgents like actors in a play that we didn't audition for, on a strange stage that we didn't choose, performing for an audience that no longer exists, we need to wake up. That's the neuroscience of being stuck, acting, not being authentic through what we believe is necessity. This isn't a philosophy. This isn't metaphor. Yeah. Modern neuroscience has given us something extraordinary, the ability to see what survival personality does to the brain. When we operate from these ego-driven programs, we are trapped in the limbic system, the primitive brain designed for threat detection. And cortisol and adrenal flood the body. The hippocampus, responsible for memory and EQ, emotional regulation, begins to actually shrink, and we can see it on a screen. The prefrontal cortex is the seat of wisdom. Now, that's at the front of your head, the very opposite place where fight, flight, and freeze lives. So the prefrontal cortex is the seat of wisdom, innovation, and creativity. Higher thinking, which we call contemplative intelligence, being able to think about your thinking. So you are, in the truest neurological sense, running on survival software in a world that demands that you thrive. Now you're getting to know yourself. Because living like that, the result can only be depression, anxiety, addictions, burnout, relationships that collapse, fear in all its millions of forms, a life that looks fine from the outside and feels like suffocation on the inside. Thousands of people have been healed through understanding what their 10 masks, their ego insurgents were. And then through that knowledge, they were able to remove them and set themselves free. So why does everything change? I'll tell you why. Because neuroscience also gives us this. Neuroplasticity. Thank goodness, thank God, the brain is not fixed. The patterns are not permanent, and the programs can be rewritten. And they can be, it takes 21 days to change a habit and 90 days to change a lifestyle. Just 90 days, and you've been suffering from depression or anxiety for 20 years, or you're 30 years old and your life has not begun for you yet. Get into a program and create a paradigm shift. But remember this, because this is crucial. Our brains, even though they are not fixed, cannot be rewritten by managing symptoms, by coping. They require everything to change. And this is the important part. That's why we say they require a paradigm shift. The word paradigm comes from the Greek paradigmia, meaning pattern or model or some kind of framework. So your paradigm is the lens through which you see all of reality. Your personality is your paradigm. Your personality becomes your personal reality. So this might be the most important thing you ever hear if you suffer emotionally, psychologically. Your personality creates that personal reality. I cannot emphasize it enough. It is not reality, which means truth. So that's why God told us that truth will set us free. So you might have to listen to that again. Your personality, the programs, these insurgents, the survival characters, they don't just respond to your reality, they create it. The controller creates a reality full of chaos to control. That judge creates a reality full of criticism. The victim creates reality full of helplessness. And the avoider, for example, creates a reality full of things to escape from. Again and again, day after day. And we build a brain that way. You are not experiencing the world as it is. You are experiencing the world as you are. So at this point, the question becomes, what would it take to become someone different? Not better or upgraded or you know, not one of these self-help stories, but fundamentally different physically, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. At the level of identity, at the level of nervous system, and deeper still at the level of soul or your sacred self. This is the question that the paradigm process was built to answer. Think of your life as divided into two territories separated by a bridge. On one side, the first half of life, the territory of survival, fight, flight, freeze, flop, fawn, fiddle, faint, friend. On this side, the ego insurgents and that prison. On the other side, the second half of life, the territory of peace, purpose, genuine power and love, or what I call the sacred self. Most people never cross that bridge, not because they aren't capable, but because nobody ever showed them where it was. The sacred self is not a concept invented in a therapy room. It's your original nature, what you were before the world taught you to be afraid. It is that part of you that still feels things deeply, that still longs for something more, that still knows somehow, somewhere beneath everything, that this is not all you're capable of. Sometimes that can be a burning desire, and that longing, that ache, that is not weakness. That is your sacred self calling to you, knocking at the door of your personality you've built over it, saying, "Let me out. I'm still here. I've always been here." So this paradigm process offers 10 pathways, one for each insurgent, one for each prison wall, and it doesn't offer quick fixes, not coping strategies, but complete reversals of identity. All our suffering comes from fear because of a mistaken identity. We forget who we really are. That's the name of the game. It started in the Garden of Eden. So where the controller learned to grip, the first pathway teaches radical surrender in its place, not as weakness, but as trust in something larger than fear. Where the judge perfected condemnation because you didn't get things right, you didn't do enough, you weren't enough. It opens up unconditional compassion towards the self. Then that compassion grows, love grows, expands, and goes out towards all of life. So you start with self-love, self-compassion, and it flows outwards. So again, where the victim learned helplessness as a survival technique, the third pathway awakens in its place radical responsibility, the recognition that you are always, always a choice, that you're enough. Never a victim, but a victor. Where the perfectionist demanded impossible purity, the fourth pathway reveals wholeness, the sacred truth that you were never broken to begin with. Where the pleaser abandoned the self, the fifth pathway restores an authentic voice, permission again to take up space, to be seen, to be real, with boundaries that don't people please. That's what we call the price of nice. And one more example would be the avoider who always fled from pain. That was the answer. That was the answer your personality gave. Wear the mask and run. So, in its place, we cultivate radical presence. We show up. Don't avoid, we don't flee. Radical presence, the courage to sit with what is and find freedom in it. And on we go with the 10 pathways of the paradigm process. So, this is radical change. It's not a weekend workshop. It's not an app you download and forget about. A real deep-seated paradigm shift changes everything. the kind that ends decades of depression. We've seen it thousands of times. It's the kind that breaks addiction at the root, that transforms relationships and reclaims purpose for 9 out of 10 people who are willing to take the journey. It's specific, sustained, systematic. It's a practice which, yes, it uses meditation and contemplation, not as relaxation though, but as neurological rewiring. We use practices like loving inquiry, a practice of turning toward the self with curiosity instead of judgment, and some people have never done that. And that's how we dismantle the insurgents one by one, shifting everything from fear to love, from powerlessness to true power or innovation. When we do this work on ourselves, community returns, connection returns, hope returns through accountability, through being witnessed in your becoming. Everything is accelerated, and you start to see what transformation actually looks like. And if you can see it in your head or hold it in your head, you can hold it in your hand. If you've made it this far, if something in you has stirred with this subject, if some part of you is saying, yes, that's me, that's the prison, I know this. So that's what we call recognition, far from hopelessness or a victim position. It's actually the beginning. Awareness is the very first move of liberation. Just remember, you did not choose the programs that were installed in you. You did not choose the childhood that shaped your ego insurgents. You didn't choose to be taught that survival was the same thing as living. So you're innocent of those things. Once you wake up, you choose what happens next. You choose what nourishes your soul from here on out. Anyone can choose to cross the bridge. Anyone. You can choose, once you're aware, to stop identifying with the personality and start identifying with the deeper one who is capable of transcending it. Do not be conformed, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. So that's it, the 10-step roadmap back to the self that was always there, waiting beneath the programs, masks, insurgents. Yeah, there's an old Zen story. A monk asked his master, as is always the case with Zen stories, what is enlightenment? And the master said, it's nothing special. It is simply the end of confusion about who you are. Isn't that wonderful? That mistaken identity is what causes anxiety. It's what sustains depression and everything in between. That's why we've healed thousands and thousands of people since in South Africa using the 10 simple pathways of this paradigm process. So far removed from spiritual performance or self-improvement or some kind of striving that you have to do. It's the end of confusion, the end of mistaken identity about who you really are. It is the recognition felt in your bones, not just your body, heart, mind, but beneath those masks and that constructed persona. There you are, whole, powerful, sacred, and waiting. Namaste.